Okay, now we're going to talk about how to create a function, not a subroutine, but a function in VB.NET. So, but before you do that, you should think about whether the last function that you, last subroutine that you suggested that you're going to use in your final project, the one that was supposedly to include parameters, you should describe whether that subroutine, whether those parameters should be by val or by ref. Okay. Now let's go on to this. But I'm sorry, when I say you should describe it, so you're going to for this homework assignment, today's homework assignment, you're going to do the project that we've been describing so far, but you're also going to do the part that relates to your final project, and that's just going to be a Word document, and you're going to have these different parts as different sections of that Word document. So you want to, in one section of it, the last section is so far, is that you want to talk about the subroutine that you are using in your final project that is going to take parameters, and you want to say whether that subroutine should be by val or by ref and why. Okay, so this is the square root symbol, right? So we can say the square root of 9. Right? And when you write this, you can assign it to a variable, right? Like x or y. Okay, y equals the square root of 9. So you could have a variable dim, can't write here, dim y as integer, right? Okay, and then you could say y equals the square root of 9. So anyway, a function you can assign what it's equal to something else, right? I can assign the square root of 9 to something, to a variable. That's not the case for a subroutine, right? Subroutine just does something, like and might show a message box or something like that, but you can't assign its value to something. But that's not the case for a function. Function has a value that you can assign to another variable. So he says a function is more or less the same thing as a subroutine. It's a bunch of code that you create yourself, and it can be used for whatever you want. The difference is that a function returns a value, right? The square root of 9 gives you a value, while a sub doesn't. When you called a sub, you did this. Okay, we had this sub before, and Visual Basic will go off and execute that code for you, and then drop down to the next line. It'll go to the next line after it finishes this. The sub add numbers is not a value, right? It does something. It might even get values and calculate them and so on, but you don't get a result from this that you can assign to a variable. It's not equal to anything. It's not like a normal variable where you can assign something to it. It's just the name of your subroutine. A function is different. It's a value. It will be equal to something, and you do have to assign a value to it. You create a function in the same way you did a sub, but this time your code will look like this. So this is kind of like the sub, except this is new, first of all. Okay? And this is telling you what, like I said here. So what kind of thing is coming out of here? An integer or a number or something, right? Some kind of number. Let's say it's an integer. Okay? So then if that's true, if that's what's coming out of your function, then you would say as integer here. If it's a double, you would say as double. So this tells you what's coming out of the function, this part here. Okay? So this time your code would look like this. So it's not private sub, it's private function. Then give it a name. And then as, this tells you what's coming out of it. And then end function at the end. So first, we've changed the word sub to function. So this was sub, now it's function. Second, we've added as something. In this case, as Boolean. So if it's as Boolean, then what's going to come out is either a true or a false. But anyway, the name we called our function is error check, and error check is now just like a variable. So now we can use error check like some variable. So like what they mean by that is maybe like here. Later on, after they've defined the function called error check, but this is later on in the code, they're using error check just like we called a subroutine. We're using error check, but we can assign it to some variable. So this thing is a Boolean variable. It's a true-false variable, and we can assign error check to it because error check is going to be either true or false. That is, it's going to send out an either true or a false, and this will get it, receive it. So he says the name we called our function error check is error check, sorry, and error check is now just like a variable. And just like a variable, we use one of the types. We can use as integer, as long, as double, as string, or any of the variable types. Let's write some code and try an example. So first we need to define error check. So here's the beginning of the definition, just like we said, and here's the end, but we have to put something inside. So this is what gets put inside. After we define that, then we can go to some other place in our code, define a variable called isError, and then run error check and assign the result to this new variable. But let's see how we define error check so we can see what this means. Okay, so we are going to write this error check function, and what's the main thing it's going to do? It's just going to check to see whether there's any text in our text function.text box. So we're going to have a box, a text box, and we're just going to check whether there's any data in it. So all it does is we have to trim it first. That's just to get rid of any extra blanks around the edges, around the front to the back of the text. And then so we give that to here, and then we just check, is it empty? If it is, then we supply a message box. So we are supplying a message box, but that's not all we're doing. We also want to give a result back. Remember, we're going to be giving a Boolean back. And in this case, the way that, so what do we want? If it's empty, then we want to say that, well, I don't know if it's what you would expect, but we want to say that the error check, the result is true. If it's not empty, the result is false. So I mean, it could have been the other way around, but we're just going to say that if the text box is empty, then we're going to say true. So the way that we do that, though, I mean, we could have made it so that we were going to say false in that case, but it doesn't matter. Either way, we have to decide on something. So we're going to say that it's true. And the way that we say that it's true is we take the name of the function and we assign true to it at the very end, like this. So that is, if this is empty, then error check will take the value true. Okay? And that means it will give off the value true. We can pass that value on to something else. and I think we did that already. Yeah, here. So we had a variable here. We're using this later. We're using error check later in our code here. We're calling error check, and then if it's true, then this will take the value true. If it's false, this will take the value false. And this variable is called isError, so kind of makes sense that if it's true, there is an error. But anyway, as I said, we could have made this change this, could have called this false, and then in whatever. Anyway, I'm not going to go over that too much because it'll just make it more confusing. But anyway, so that's how we use it as well. Okay, so let's see what he says. So if this, then error check is true. This is almost the same code our sub called error check in a previous section. The difference is one added line. So is that true? Yeah. The only difference is this. Remember that error check is now like a variable. In this case, it was a Boolean variable. So if there's nothing in the text, we have set error check to true. An else part can also be added. To the if statement. So we could have an else part in here. The if statement set to false, otherwise you may get a green underline in your code editor for the end function. So we could also put this in. Else error check equals false. Right? So if it's not true, then it's false. Again, this code is not doing much good by itself. We need a way to use it. So we define this function, but we want to use it. And we said we're going to use it here. So this time, because we've set up a function, we have to assign the value of the function to a variable, like this. So we define a variable that we want to assign error check's value to, and then we assign error check to the value to that variable. Here we are saying run the function called error check. When you have finished, assign the value of error check to the variable called isError. Remember, the value of error check can be here, and if we're inside this if part, if we're here, then error check will be true. Else, error check will be false. So those are the two values that error check can be, and we're going to assign that to here. Once the code is executed, we can then use the variable isError. So after we've done all this, then isError is either going to be true or false, and its test value. If it's true, then we know that the user did not enter anything into the text box. If it's false, then we know that they did. The benefit of using a function to check our errors is that we can halt the program if isError is true, like this. Of course, now we have a value for isError. So we say if it's true, then exit the sub. End if. So he says double click your button and add the following. isError as Boolean. Add this to run error check, and then add this. Exit the sub if it's true. Else is, and then he's putting isError as false. Run your program again. Click the button when the text box is blank and see what happens. Then enter some text into the text box and click your button again. So try it when it's blank, see what happens, then put some text in there and see what happens. Okay, so if it's blank, then the sub is exited. Otherwise, we see another message box saying this. To sum up then, a function will return a value. A function will return a value. You put this value into the name of your function. That's what we did here. We when we define the function, at the end we put this into here. Or it doesn't have to be at the end, but somewhere we put this into here. So so this is the name of our function, and somewhere in the code we write that our function gets a particular value. And that's what we've done here. So you put this value into the name of your function. You then assign the value of the function to a variable. We also did that. We assigned the value of the function to this variable. And then you can test this variable to see what's in it. So this got something. This resulted in something which we put in here. Then we can test what's in there and do different things depending on what's in there.